and thank you for joining us this morning for this will be an interesting discussion about green energy. And thank you to AgriSA for asking us at Farmers Weekly to partner with you for this discussion. We're quickly going to hear an introduction from Kulani Sawia, who is the Chief Economist at AgriSA.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session hosted by AgriSA in partnership with Farmers Weekly, where we'll be discussing green energy, as Denene has alluded to. We are very excited to bring you a group of speakers that will unpack this topic at a time where energy supply still remains on everyone's lips. This especially after the latest episode of load shedding, the subsequent surprise announcement by President Ramaphosa to lift the threshold for self-generation, as well as the latest electricity tariff increase that will take effect this week. As we all know, electricity is an important input for farmers, and the sector currently spends more than 146 billion on intermediate goods and services, of which electricity accounts for about 7 to 9% in that regard. So in an environment where traditional electricity source is not reliable and stable, it can be detrimental to the sector. But I would not get into that. Let me not waste any more time. I'll just hand it over back to Denene, who will be our moderator for the day, and she will just introduce the speakers for the day. We're looking forward to a great conversation this morning, and everyone must enjoy. Thank you. Over to you, Denene.
Thank you for that, Kulani. So good morning again to everyone who's joined us in the last minute or so for this webinar on Can Green Energy in Agriculture Be a Game Changer? That was arranged by AgriSA in partnership with us at Farmers Weekly. I'm Denene, I'm the editor of Farmers Weekly, and with South Africa back in level 4 lockdown, this is definitely a difficult time for many of us. And I just want to say that we are thinking of all of your family members, friends, and colleagues who are battling the disease. It is an uncertain and stressful time also for those of us who work in industry that are being directly affected by the COVID-19 lockdown measures. And we just also keep those people in our thoughts who are battling due to these new lockdown measures. So it has on many levels been a hard and exhausting year and a couple of months, and that is why it is such a welcome opportunity and with a great sense of relief to talk today about a topic that represents such hope and opportunity for the future. There are many reasons to get excited about renewable energy, and our presenters today will talk about some of these reasons in detail. Over the last couple of months, as we've entered the winter season, South Africa has again been affected by countrywide blackouts due to Eskom's inability to supply sufficient electricity. And at the same time, we are now going to experience double-digit electricity price increases that are coming into effect in the next month or so, with rate increases in the region of about 15%. This represents a massive rise in cost for energy-intensive businesses such as irrigation agriculture, for example, and also agribusinesses in the value chain that makes use of cooling facilities. So not only does an investment in renewable energy present an opportunity for businesses to have more reliable energy supply, it also gives the producer at least some control over the cost of energy. But we will not only talk about the economic benefits of renewable energy, this type of electricity generation also holds environmental benefits that are equally important and necessary to ensure a sustainable future for our planet and all of us who live here. The renewable sector is a dynamic industry, and we are seeing continual improvement in the type of technology offered. And along with this, we are also seeing cost decreases coming into play, making these solutions more accessible to a wider range of consumers and users. So that's just quickly some of the issues that we will discuss today. I'm going to run through the program very quickly. So we've got 4 speakers today. We've got John Hudson, who's the National Head of Agriculture at Nedbank, who will be our first presenter. After that, we will hear from Schutte, who is a director at Sonfin, which is an alternative energy company specializing in solar PV installations. After that, you will hear from Richard Nicholson. He's the Economic Research Manager at the South African Canegrowers Association. And then our 4th speaker is Dr. Tokka van den Heever, who is a table grape farmer from the Northern Cape. So after each presentation, if you've got any pressing questions that you want to ask the presenters, you're welcome to post them in the Q&A section, and we'll deal with 1 or 2 questions after each presentation. But we will have a panel session after the 4 speakers have given their short presentations. And during this panel session, there will be an opportunity again for any questions that you might have to any of the presenters. And since we're hosting this in a meeting format, you are also welcome to indicate by raising your hand using the Zoom functions. And we will enable your microphone. So if you want to ask your question that way, you're also welcome to do so. Otherwise, as I said, just post it in the question and answer section or in the chat function, and I will pick it up from there. So we're going to move straight in with our first presenter, who I said is John Hudson, the National Head for Agriculture at Nedbank. And John is going to speak a bit about some of the economics and the financing of private green energy operations. And he will also speak about some of the reasons why it makes sense on the financial side, but then also on the environmental side to make the switch to renewable energy. Welcome, John, and good morning.
Morning. Good morning, Denene. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly, so I'm going to share your presentation, and then if you just tell me when I need to move on.
Certainly. So thank you to Christo and the team. We have a long-standing working relationship with them, and then of course to Farmers Weekly. So really happy to be here today. I hope my presentation comes up shortly. But what I'd like to say at the start, that there is quite a few slides. I'm certainly not going to dwell on all these slides and take up too much time. But what I'd like to say at the start, and it's something that I would urge every person to view if they have time. I think, possibly the only positive that's come out of the pandemic is that we've given our Earth the year to breathe, and this came through quite clearly. I actually watched the documentary last night, and it's called "The Year the Earth Changed," and we've given our Earth some time to breathe, and it is just quite amazing as to what has happened in terms of the environment, the different species, etc. And it tends to run through it from around the world. So it goes from India to Cape Town to America to South America, and for me it just shows what can be done, and I think sustainability is part of that journey. And if for people that may have felt that sustainability is not real, that we can't change what we're doing, then really watch this documentary. It is absolutely outstanding, and you can find it on, I think it's on ITV TV, so that's a good place to start. So what I can say is that 2020 hit us like a steam train, and 2021, and hence my title, which I think is quite apt, is time for action. Can we move on, Denene? So I've already mentioned this. I think this slide just tells us exactly where we are. And if you think back to 2020, the pandemic, floods, forest fires, etc., we've turned this world upside down. Next slide. What really brought this home to me was the Worldwide Fund for Nature's 2020 Global Living Planet Index, which shows us that since 1970, we've lost 68% of our species. So the biodiversity index has plummeted. And quite honestly, we need to turn that around. And possibly what has happened in this last year is showing that if we, if we give it a chance, we can turn it around. Next slide. So if we look at South Africa, because often there's talk about, well, we're not the biggest contributor. Look at China, look at America. But if you do it on a weighted basis, you can see that the world average in terms of CO2 per GDP is 0.3, and we're sitting at 0.7. So that's double the world average. So quite honestly, we have got a lot to do, and maybe more so than what we think. Next slide. I'm just going to run through very quickly. I think it's quite important from Nedbank's point of view as to why we focus on sustainability. And if you look at our purpose, is to use our financial expertise to do good for individuals, families, business, and society. So I think as a purpose-driven organization, this is really important. But what really underpins it, and Denene, you can move to the next slide. Just maybe go through 2 slides, yeah, and the next one as well. Right, there we go. So I think, most of us, sorry, one back. So most of us will have seen now that, will have seen these sustainable development goals, and SDGs is what really underpins our purpose and gives us focus in terms of living our purpose as well. Next slide. So what we've really focused on as a bank is that if we look at those 3 circles, and I'll just explain them very quickly. CSI spend, which is the smallest one, that's what we do through the foundation, Nedbank Foundation, and that's a small amount in terms of what we can contribute. So it's 124 million. So there's yes, there's certainly impact, and we look at projects that have catalytic impact, but the reality is it's 124 million, and we spread that amongst many SDGs and many projects. If you look at what we spend, Nedbank spends in terms of 30 billion, sure, we can do a lot through, what suppliers we use and how we drive that. So very important, 30 billion. The biggest impact, around about 170 to 180 billion, and it might be even a bit more now, is through lending. So, we know that if we want to drive change, we need to do it through our lending to have the greatest impact. Next slide, please. I'm just going to mention the role of partnerships, and I'll just put one up on the screen. WWF has been a partner for 30 years. In fact, this year was 30 years in terms of celebration, etc. But in the last 8 years, they've been our partner from an agricultural point of view. And this is critical from a broad-based sustainability perspective. And what I like about this partnership is that, yes, it has a very clear environmental focus, but it is also practical in terms of understanding that we need to keep farmers on the land, and they need to be profitable and sustainable. And I can talk to quite a few partnerships. I'm not going to go through them all now, but I think partnerships is critical going forward. And this is probably going to form the foundation of how we do things, not only for Nedbank. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to mention here, and I'm not going to go through all these points, is that, quite clearly climate change is now one of the top risk factors, if not the top risk factors facing farmers. And I do think that it's not purely about sort of renewable energy. So if we go back to the topic, is renewable energy a game changer? Well, maybe on its own, it's certainly not a silver bullet, but in combination with other sustainability practices, it certainly is a game changer. And therefore, I think, certainly from a banker's point of view, the way to look at it, and whether it's water, energy, soil health, food waste, recycling, etc., you need to look at all of those from a risk-based view. So when you're looking at your business, what is the risk that you're facing, climate risk? And it might even be from a cost perspective as well. So that's starting to come through. What we're seeing is that new technology such as solar panels and so on is that if you go back 5 years, 10 years, it was very difficult to get farmers to consider taking it up. But that has now changed. The rands and cents are stacking up. So not only from a security of supply, but also from in terms of payback period. So we're seeing quite clearly farmers are taking it up because it makes business sense. And I think that's one of the key moves that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. Next slide, please. So this I just took out of it was a glossary, and it had various definitions. And renewable energy, and it's very practical. It's common sense. I mean, you can read it for yourself. But fossil fuels, we burn them once and they're consumed and they're gone forever. Whereas solar energy, renewable, it's from the sun, it's harvested daily, no effect on the sun energy. We can harvest it again tomorrow. So in that sense, especially from a production point of view, and I'll go to the next slide, please, Denene. If we look at this slide, and it talks about life cycles. So, I think it's a bit unfair to say renewable energy, if you just look at that sort of production or that operational process, as it's called here. If you look at that in isolation, there is no comparison against coal-fired electricity. But if you have to look at the upstream and the downstream, so the before and after, to really look at the full life cycle. And even then you can see PV or solar, as it's called, is 40 grams CO2 per kilowatt hour, and coal-fired electricity 1,000. So I think if you look at the whole life cycle and you take into account the setup and then the decommissioning part of it, it is certainly a no-brainer from that point of view. Next slide, please. So I think, and I don't want to spend too much time because I'm sure some of the other panelists are going to talk to this. Certainly what we feel from Nedbank's point of view is that when you're looking at a funding arrangement, we do need to see the benefit from a business sustainability and a financial sustainability. So we do expect our farmers to do their homework. They must understand the existing demand, the mix of tariffs, because quite honestly, the sun cycle doesn't always match the sort of demand cycle in terms of electricity. So it's really important that you do your homework properly. If you then do your sums correctly, and you've got to look at the risk-based approach, as I said, you've then got to put that into cash flow projections. You've got to look at the repayment ability, critical. But that's the theory. This solar installation has to work. It has to match up. It has to then deliver on what it's meant to do. Because if it doesn't, it's going to put your whole business at risk. And I'm sure some of the other speakers will speak to that, because that is critical. At the end of the day, we don't want to get 3-4 years down the line in terms of financing it to find that it's now subpar and it's not doing what it should do, and it actually puts your whole business at risk. Next slide, please. So then just a couple of slides to, just to round up, is that Nedbank, we do finance sustainability. From an agricultural point of view, our focus is on water, energy, soil health, and food waste, recycling part of the food waste, if you want to call it that. I think, as I mentioned at the outset, really important that you look at it from a holistic point of view. We certainly feel that the discussion with each client is different. We have to look at each of their own circumstances. We need to really understand what works for them. But in so doing, I think you can have an approach which talks to building resilient farming businesses. And that's what we want to do going forward. I think just to add on to it at this point is to say that where we haven't got to yet is how banks use the data on the back end. So yes, we are helping clients, look at climate risk, etc. What are we doing with that data on the back end? And I think that's a work in progress as to how we look at our risk modeling, and in so doing, then look to ensure that we're providing funding which matches the risk. Because if we're putting something in place which actually reduces risk, we should be looking to give you that benefit in terms of pricing. But that's certainly work in progress. I just want to end off then by saying, from a financing point of view, we do have time periods up to 8 years, because if you go back 3 or 4 or 5 years, quite difficult to see that repayment ability in a short period of time, or let's say, in a normal 5-6 year time period. We extended it to 8 years to make it, or to help it to be cash flow neutral. But what is important now is that the payback times have come down drastically. So, recently I've been to 3 farmers in the last year, who, one is a mushroom farmer, one is a bee farmer, and one is a citrus farmer. The citrus farmer and the mushroom farmer are grid tied, have reduced their, or have sort of altered their mix of energy substantially. They're looking at it from 2 points of view. One is the risk of or security of supply, but the other is a cost competitive point of view. And then the bee farmer who's gone totally off grid, obviously a different demand in terms of energy, but all of them are looking at payback periods which are less than 4 years. It does depend again whether you're going for the batteries or no batteries, because typically to add batteries to a system probably doubles the cost of that installation, which can then make it significant. Okay, Denene, just the last 2 or 3 slides, just run through the next one. Okay, yep, and then you can go through to the last one. All right, so I think I just want to finish off with this. Dr. Zeus is one of my favorites, and in terms of growing up, I used to love Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham, etc. And so I think if you look at his quote at the bottom, unless someone like you and us cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not, and that's truly where we are now, given the context that we're in. That we do have to pull together, and if we do that, I think we can make a difference. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, John. So yeah, quickly before we move on, so one of the questions that I've got for you, and we can come back to some of the other questions later, is from the bank's perspective, what is your long-term outlook for Eskom? And is it such that you would really recommend all farmers that do rely on electricity for their processes to seriously consider investing in at least some degree of self-generation?
Yes, and let me, I think, Denene, let me talk to the mushroom farmer example. So here's a farmer producing mushrooms, uses tons of energy during the day. I think his monthly bill's about 150,000. It's going up at, as you said, 15%, 16% per annum. And he's also starting to add new grower rooms as well. So there's a couple of issues with that. One is security of supply. As he puts on or invests in new grower rooms, he needs to have additional electricity. Now, that's not necessarily always available. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they, in terms of the margin squeeze that is playing out, electricity costs, and I think Kulani mentioned up front, it's a massive input into to many businesses, and mushroom farmer would be no different. So for them to be cost competitive and to help peg their costs, so what he's done is he's invested in about a third of his capacity. He's about 200 to 300 kilowatts that he's now actually invested in terms of capacity. And that's probably, a quarter of his total mix. It is a first phase, it's ground mounted. So he had to buy some land next door, because that's the other thing, is not everybody has sufficient roof space or land. And in this case, he had to buy land to put panels on. It's sort of estimated you need about a hectare for sort of 1 megawatt plant. And so from his point of view, pegging costs and security of supply are critical to his business. So just coming back to your question around Eskom, yes, I mean, it's just incredible to see that they've managed to shave off 90 billion, from their balance sheet. Fantastic progress, and I think they need to be applauded for that. But at this point, the debt load still remains extremely high. We've had subdued economic growth, so you could argue that the demand for electricity has been subdued as well. So if we get back into a growth phase, and if we start to really grow this economy, it's going to be a restriction or a constraint. And I think that's a big fear. And that's why we also welcome, and it was a major shift going from 1 megawatt to 100 megawatts in terms of production capacity. That is just astounding. I mean, 100 megawatts can probably help to fire up smelters, etc., or these big sort of coal mines and so on. So, Richard might talk a bit more about that later. And so these are positive signals, and I think it is an appreciation that we need to have a better energy mix going forward. It's good for the country, it's good for the environment. So all in all, the restrictions that sort of Eskom are facing on the constraints, I think is a realization that we have to look to alternative energy. So, it's not all bad. It's not all bad.
Okay, thanks for that, John. We are going to, I will get back to you with some more questions later in the discussion. But for now, we are going to move on to our next speaker, Chris Schutte from Sonfin. If I can just ask you, John, you can turn off your microphone and your video. And Chris, welcome and thank you for joining us, Chris. I hope you're well today.
Thanks, Dean.
I'm going to start sharing your presentation in a minute. Well, not a minute, a couple of seconds. There we go. So as I said, Chris is a director at Sonfin, who is a business that specializes in solar PV installations.
Thanks, Denene. Thanks for the opportunity and good morning, audience. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to chat to you guys today. Just to give you some information on how the market is working and how we are working together with Eskom and how we're working together with NERSA and how installations and what you need to look at if you want to invest in solar system. Sonfin is an EPC solar company that's situated in Pretoria. We're operating in all the provinces of South Africa in the last 10 years. So we've been working closely with Eskom and we've been working closely with NERSA. Sonfin is corporate member with Agri SA. Kulani can get in there as well. We've been working very hard on to getting the processes at Eskom and the processes at NERSA. It wasn't just jump into it and start doing it. It would take a couple of years for us to get where we are today for the agricultural side. It was hard work, but I think that we moved. Every year, something happens at Eskom that's moving in a positive direction for the agro sector, but we can't sit still. We need to make change and we need to get back and put pressure on Eskom and put pressure on NERSA to see the benefit that renewable energy can give to the agricultural side. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Denene. All right, so if you look at a solar company that you need to come out to your farm and they must do a survey to see how you're going to connect onto Eskom with your solar system, you have what we call a grid tie connection. So Eskom have two network connections that they allow you to connect onto the grid. They allow you to connect onto low voltage or they allow you to connect onto medium voltage. So I'm just going to run quickly the difference between the two connections. so that you can understand what is the difference between them. And the first one, you have your low voltage connections. That is your solar plants that is less than 350 kilowatt. Like John mentioned in the previous presentation, that all depends on the energy that your farm is going to use. Because on a beef farm, your energy use will be different when on a citrus farm. So that will depend then on what connection we will look at Eskom side. You're connecting at a 230 volt low voltage connection. Your agreements and your registration and your banking agreements on both the connections, your low voltage connections and your medium voltage connections, are the same. So if you connect onto a low voltage system, you still need to get all your agreements in place with Eskom before you can connect your system. You still need to get your registration letter in place, and then you need to get your offsetting and banking in place. Next slide, please, Denene. Then you get your medium voltage connection at Eskom. So your medium voltage connection will be for your more bigger farmer on the outside, like your citrus farmer. That is somebody that will have a combination of irrigation on his farm. It will have a cooling facility. It will have a packaging unit. So their energy usage will be very high. And that is your farmer that will look at a medium voltage side. What happens on your medium voltage side? Eskom will allow you to connect up to 1 megawatt as it stands now. And I will get to that on a later stage. And they will allow you to do offsetting and banking up to 1 megawatt. You will connect at your 11 or your 22 kV. Everything will be the same. You need to get an agreement from Eskom. You need to get a registration letter from NASA. You need to get a banking agreement in place. The difference is on your 1 megawatt systems is if you have multiple points on your farm, point of connections from Eskom, you can then install one solar system on your farm, and you can then recon all your accounts onto one account, and then you can offset and banking against all your point of connections that you have on your farm. Next slide, please, Denene. I just want to run through the Eskom approval process. If I can stand still just for a few seconds on that side. When do I need to go to Eskom to get an approval to get my system connected onto the grid? If you do a grid tie system, you need to go to Eskom to get a approval process in place. How do I know that I've got a grid tie system? As soon as Eskom is doing load shedding on your farm and your solar plant is off while the Eskom power is off, you've got a grid tie system and you need to get an approval from Eskom. So even if you are putting up a solar farm for self-consumption and you're not feeding back any electricity onto the grid, you still need to go through the full process of Eskom and the registration process of NASA. Your approval process at Eskom is when you get someone that did a presentation and you've got your size of your system that you want to connect. You then apply at Eskom at your customer exec, where you will phone your customer exec. They will send you an application form. You will go through your application form. You will pay an application fee at Eskom. It depends on the size of your system. It's an LV connection, on an MV connection, it will be a different application fee. This is not a process that's happening in days' time or even weeks' time. We are looking at, and I think that Dr. Tokka will mention it as well, you are looking at anything between 6 to 12 months for approval from Eskom. So this is where we are working together with Agri SA to see if we can get this timeline of Eskom just off to say in 3 months' time that we can get approval. What is on the good side as well, I can say on the LV connections of Eskom is they do work on it to get the approval in 3 to 6 months. but it all depends on the province that you are working in. For instance, if you look at the Western Cape, you will most probably get your approvals in 3 to 6 months. But if you move over to Limpopo or you move over to the Northern Cape, there you're looking at 6 months and more for your approval. So if you start with your approval at Eskom, you will then do an application form. It will take you 3 to 6 months, and then you will receive a cost estimate letter. Your cost estimate letter is still not a binding contract with Eskom. It's only a study that Eskom have done on their network to see that you can connect the system onto the network and can feed back. After you have, and they will give you a cost that is going to cost you to connect onto the system. Again, LV and MV, different costs involved into that. So you can then take that cost of what Eskom is going to ask you to connect onto the grid. You can then put it onto your solar system, and you can work out your cash flow projections onto that. As soon as you then accept the cost estimate letter of Eskom, you will move over to a budget quote. And again, there we are looking at 3 to 6 months for them to give you a budget quote. So now you can see we're looking at 12 months plus just to get those 2 letters. As soon as you receive your budget quote, that will be your final approval that you have received from Eskom. They will give you your final costing, and you know that you can connect onto the grid. But that's not where it ends. So now you then accept the budget quote. As soon as you accept the budget quote, you pay your connection fees that needs to be paid. Eskom will then insure you with a letter that you need to go to NERSA, and then you can only go to NERSA and then start with your application on the side of NERSA. I will chat on NERSA's process as well, but there's a timeline running after that. Just for audiences on the outside, after receiving the registration certificate, then only start to do your Eskom build. Sign your distribution and connection agreements, complete the build of the Eskom point and the solar plant, commission plant, sign the amendment agreement, receive Eskom accounts. Never take any deposits of any solar company before you don't have a budget quote, a signed budget quote from Eskom, and you have a signed registration letter from NERSA. Because if you do go and you build your solar plant before you've got any of that red tape or paperwork in hand, there can be that Eskom can say to you, listen, I can't let you connect onto our network because of network problems or because of anything that's happening in the market. Or NERSA can say to you, listen here, but there's administrative problems and you can't connect the solar system. Then you will sit with that white elephant on your farm. So please just make sure that you have got all your paperwork in place before you start installing a solar system. If you can move to the next slide, please, Denene. Just a quick way that I want to run through your rules for exporting. That's offsetting and banking of energy. So like I mentioned previously, Eskom is allowing us to export and then do offsetting and banking of energy on the grid. But that is only up to 1 megawatt. I will, on a later slide, just go on with the 1 megawatt. So just to make sure that you are able to do offsetting and banking of energy on your solar farm where you've installed it, all your accounts must be on the same name, all your Eskom accounts. All your accounts must be on the same Eskom line, the same network. All your accounts must be on a Rura Flex tariff structure. I just want to stand still a bit at the Rura Flex tariff structure. So if you've got a system that's connected onto Eskom's network and you've got a land rate tariff structure, then you know you're not legally connected onto Eskom. Eskom will only allow a solar plant to be connected onto their network if you've got a Rura Flex tariff structure. The reason being for that is if you are going to feed back onto the grid and you're not allowed to feed back onto the grid, they will pick it up with their digital meter. And then they will then tell you, listen, you must get your offsetting and banking agreements in place to feed back onto the grid. If you feed back onto the grid, then on your Rura Flex tariff structure, Eskom will then pick up if you are feeding back in red time, yellow time, or green time. Because if you feed back into that different time structures of Eskom, they will then offset and banking against that. So all the power that you then feed back in your red time. If you do banking with Eskom, you must use in red time as well. Eskom do allow for banking over a 12-month period from March to April. So it's a 1-year banking period that they do allow. So again, if you do get a company that comes out to your farm and they are going to do self-consumption, even offsetting or banking, you must make sure about your tariff structure, how you use your energy, in your different time structures. John mentioned it as well, that it's important to see when you are using your power. Are you using more of your power during the yellow time, during the red time, during the green time? Because that is going to say to us what size of system that you need to install on your farm. Because if you're oversizing your system, you're overcapitalizing your system, and you will lose that power, because Eskom will only allow you 12 months banking. After 12 months, if there's more power banked onto the grid, what you are approved for, they will take their power away from you and they will not reimburse you for that power. Can we go to the next slide, please, Denene? I think that the presentation will be made available afterwards. I don't know, but there's your NASA process. It's on their website. That process, as it sits there, will take roughly 90 days. So as soon as Eskom, after you have received your budget quote from Eskom, and Eskom has given you a letter that you can go and apply for your registration letter, you are going to go through a 90-day approval process at NASA, where you're going to fill in forms, where you're going to give them all your company details that they will need, all your presentations on how your system is going to work, how's it going to feedback, if it's going to feedback, have you received all your documents from Eskom. You will then pay a 200 Rand once-off registration fee at NASA. Then they will go to the electrical sub committee meeting. That meeting is held every month, every 4 weeks, once a month. So they will say, for instance, if you've missed the one meeting, it will need to go over to another meeting, and that's how they work onto their 90 days. Not one of our registrations letters at this stage we have received in less than 90 days. So if we look at your approval process from Eskom, cost estimate letter, 3 to 6 months. Then you accept it, you go over to your budget quote, 3 to 6 months. As soon as you receive your budget quote and you accept it, you go to NASA, 90 days. So yeah, we look at roughly more than a year just to get all your processes in place. So if you get a company that wants to do the solar system installation, wants to take your deposit, but don't have all that in place, you will have your system connected onto the grid illegally, and you will have then Eskom can come out and then shut down your electricity, or they can give you a penalty for that system that is connected illegally on the system. So please make sure that your red tape, your administration has been sorted out before you connect your system onto the grid. Next slide, please, Denene. All right, so I've just given you in a short time that I can some of the processes that I had. I want to stand still quickly at NASA versus the 100 megawatt. Great stuff. Thanks, Mr. President. Thanks for helping us to get to the 100 megawatt registration. But yes, that is for our commercial side. Like I speak to Kulani and Agri-SA around this. On the agricultural side, we still have a big problem around that, because Eskom and most of our farmers, Eskom is only allowing us to connect a 1 megawatt onto the network, only allowing us to do banking on the network for 1 megawatt. So, for example, I've got one of my farmers in Douglas that I'm busy with. That farmer needs to have a system of 5 megawatt connected onto the grid and do banking for him to have roughly a 70% saving on his farm with the solar system. Now the president has said, yes, great, let's do 100 megawatt. That is good and everything. But now we sit with a problem with Eskom, because Eskom said, I'm not going to allow anything bigger than 1 megawatt to be connected onto my grid and do banking on my grid. So yeah, there we sit with a problem. That's the one thing. The another thing is around the banking rules that Eskom's got. So now the government has said, yeah, let's go for the 100 megawatt. Let's try to outline and help load shedding and stuff. The agricultural is the part of the economy that's got place and space available to connect solar systems. But we are being kept back from NASA, and we've been keeping back from Eskom to exploit this 100 megawatt. And the Afrikaans heading there of Network 24 on the 11th June sums it up for me very good. Hulle sê, wag 'n bietjie. It's not so easy that we're going to just add 100 megawatt onto our system. Denene, you can go to the next slide. So yeah, guys, that's just a bit of my take on the 100 megawatt. I think that we're still going to have to take a lot into this. They've given the Department of Energy 60 days to gazette. I've never seen the Department of Energy gazetted anything in less than 60 days, so that needs to happen. NASA still doesn't have a process in place. They have only a process in place to do registration of 1 megawatt. It took us, and Agri-SA can confirm with it, it took us 2 years to get a process in place with NASA just to get registrations of 1 megawatt. So how long is it going to take NASA to get 100 megawatt registration process in place? But yeah, it's not to be negative. There is positive around it. We are moving in the right directions. Just to give you the farmers and the audience on the outside a bit of reference sites in our market, you get rooftop installations, you get ground installations. Most of the companies, solar companies on the outside, they love rooftop installations. The reason for that is it's a cheap installation. It's very cheap to do an installation on a rooftop. Where we say is the problem with the rooftop installation is that what is happening with that solar installation in 15 years time, in 20 years time. Now you sell that the module to your farmer. You say to your farmer, you've got a 25-year performance warranty on your system. What do that module, or what is that module going to do with your roof in 25 years time? We don't know. So that's why we say ground installation is better than a rooftop installation. We're not even looking at stuff like if you need to clean your modules. Now you need to put somebody on the roof just to think about the health and safety and the risk on that. But yeah, if you do not have space available on the ground to do a solar installation in rooftop, you can do rooftop, you can do planning around rooftop installations to do a rooftop installation. Next slide, please, Denene. This is an example of a medium volt connection point. Why will you need a medium volt connection point, and why is it important for me to show a picture for you of a connection point that is medium volt on Eskom? If you do get a company that's going to connect you onto a solar system, and your solar system is bigger than 350 kilowatt peak, your connection point needs to look like that. You need to have an auto recloser in place. You need to have a CTVT unit in place that can do the metering to see what power you are feeding back onto the grid and what power you are using for yourself. So just to show you a picture of how your connection point is looking. Then just my last slide, please, Denene. And again, sorry for the Afrikaans, but this sums it very up. On the 25th of June at 11, it was published, Kragkrisis is die einde in sig. And you did ask that question to John earlier as well. What I can say is the following. Mr. Moderator has got a plan. At least we've got a plan at this stage. Previously, we did not have a plan in place. So there is a plan in place, and he is setting that plan out, and that plan is working. He is busy doing maintenance on the substations. He is doing maintenance on the power stations. So there is stuff happening. So the positive around this is we will not be able to see that load shedding is going to go down in the next 2 or 3 years, but it is going to go down. As soon as there's more and more green energy solar systems connected on the grid, there will be more power that is going to help Eskom. So yes, this is a good investment to go to. It is helping South Africa. It is helping our network, and it is helping our economy. And I just want to say, if you are thinking of investing in a solar system, I think that you are on the right way. Thanks, Denene.
Chris, thanks very much for that. I do want to move on because we are starting to run out of time a bit. We've got one question from Guguletu Mashlangu, who posted via Twitter. But this is maybe something that we need to get back to in more detail in the panel discussion. And she just wants to know, in terms of cost and land space, typically what should a farmer expect to have available? So that's in terms of cost for, I know it's very difficult because systems vary so much, but maybe just, for a system on the farm that can maybe run one pump and the household, what should farmers look at in terms of space and cost?
Okay, that's very easy. You can look at a 1 megawatt solar farm. You can do on a 1 hectare. So now if you go smaller, then you just add it. So if you are going to do a 500 kilowatt system, you're looking at half an hectare. If you're looking at a 100 kilowatt system, you're looking at 0.1 of a hectare. So that's how you can do your spacing around that. So costing is as well. So so it's a bit different on the costing. So the bigger the system, the cheaper the cost per kilowatt. The smaller the system, the higher the cost is. Because now it's easier for me if I do an installation, for instance, at Dr. Tokka, I did 2 systems at once. Now I can bring all my equipment in at once. But now if I do 10 kilowatt small systems, I can't bring all my equipment onto once, and that's why my cost will be higher than on the kilowatt power.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Chris. I think there's a couple of more questions for you, but I do want to move on, so we will get back to the questions during the panel discussion. So I want to move on to our next presenter, Richard. So Chris, if I can ask you to switch off your, and just waiting for Richard. Sorry, Richard, do you have your mic on? There we go. You can just unmute.
Yeah. There we go.
Welcome, Richard, and thanks for joining us. And as I said, Richard is from SA Canegrowers, who is going to talk to us a bit about how green energy can be a game changer, specifically for the sugarcane industry. I'm going to share your presentation now, Richard, and then hand over to you. Okay, you could just let me know when I can move on.
Yeah, thank you, Denene, and thank you, Farmers Weekly and Agri SA for allowing us to join this very useful conversation. I think it's incredibly important topic, and one that we in the sugar industry have been working on for a very, very long time. And I think, as Chris was saying, these things unfortunately don't happen overnight. It takes a lot of hard work and energy that goes on behind the scenes to make things happen. So thank you very much for having us. Yeah, the next one there, Denene, thanks. Just to show you us at SA Canegrowers Association, we represent all sugarcane farmers. There are about 1,200 large-scale commercial farmers, including land reform farmers, and about 20,000 small-scale farmers in the industry, and we represent them at the industry level. So we form the SA Canegrowers Association, and then we talk to the Millers Association, and we then run the industry under the Sugar Act, for those who don't know the sugar industry. So we currently still have an act, and it's because that sugarcane needs a mill to make it worthwhile, to make it worth anything. Otherwise, it's just chewing cane, which isn't as useful to many people outside of KZN and Mpumalanga. So you need a mill to transform your sugarcane into sugar or other useful things like molasses. But what we do at SA Canegrowers is we look to, our mission is to play a leading role in growing the sugarcane sector. And one of the main things is through diversification opportunities. And I'll talk to that a lot now in this presentation, using innovation and research and specialized services. And that's basically what we're doing. So we're looking at diversification into the energy sector, that will help contribute to our industry. The next one there, Denene. This just shows you the contribution to the economy. We're the second largest field crop by value in South Africa, after the maize industry, and we employ a lot of people on the ground. You can see the direct jobs; those are the on-farm jobs, and then the indirect employment through the supply chain, through the mills, through the rural towns that are operating around the mills. And then you've got your gross industry revenue, which is brought in every year, which is significant for our industry and for the country and the economy. You can see there that we produce 2.1 million tons of sugar from about 19.8 or about 20 million tons of cane, and the area under production there. So the domestic value chain is quite significant. 400 million per annum that goes out into those rural areas. And this is a point we always make to government, is that all this is created deep in rural areas where there are no other opportunities. Next one, Denene. If you can click again and again. There we go. Okay, so we actually have a dilemma in the sugar industry. We've had it since the beginning of the industry, basically. On the top left-hand side there, you can see in the blue at the bottom, that's our local market demand. That is what is taken in the local market. The local market is SACU, the South African Customs Union, which includes Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, Eswatini, and South Africa. And about when I joined the industry 7 years ago, it was 1.6 million tons. It's now down to about 1.4 million tons of sugar that is taken up by the local market. The rest of it has to be exported. And because every other sugarcane and sugar industry around the world has some sort of protection or some subsidy or some government influence in the industry, the industries are protected, and therefore they produce excess sugar. And because they produce this excess sugar, all the sugar on the market is dumped, meaning that it is sitting there on the world market at a price of less the cost of production anywhere around the world. So your sugar that's sitting on the world market is you cannot produce that for that price, and so that's why you have refiners setting up in countries like the UAE. They buy world sugar, they refine it, and they sell it on. There's an opportunity for them to do that. But in the South African circumstance, we're looking at our excess sugar and our excess sugar cane that we can use for something else. On the top right-hand graph there, you can see the impact on the local demand of the sugar tax, the health promotion levy. That had a significant impact on our local demand for sugar, which meant that the price dropped for the farmers. And when the price drops for the farmers, 30% of their gross revenue goes to their farm staff, employing people in the rural areas. So when you have a price drop, then you start seeing issues with retaining staff and retrenchments maybe in the rural areas. And this is definitely not what we want to happen. So we are looking for a home, basically, for our export sugar and our excess cane. And these are the graphs that show you can see the arrows in the bottom right there. Those arrows show the difference between the saleable sugar and the local market. And essentially, we're looking for about 750,000 tons of sugar, which translates into about 6 to 8 million tons of cane, that is what we're looking to use in a new environment, in a new production system, in a renewable energy system that we have been working on for a very long time. So I'll go into the next slide and try and show you what we're on to try and do. So the master plan, thank goodness for the master plan. We were quite proud that the sugar industry was one of the first industries to get the master plan up and running very early on, and it was announced in Parliament. We all said cheers to that. But basically, you can see all the task teams that come out of the master plan, and a lot of them are speaking to issues we have today throughout the country. The main one that we're focusing on in this presentation is the sugar-based value chain diversification strategy. And these task teams are all working hard at the moment to try and gather all the research and all the evidence and all the proposals to actually take solutions to market. And this sugarcane-based value chain has a number of opportunities that we are definitely looking at. The next slide there, please. Oh, yeah. Right, that's perfect. Right, so I'm just going to sit on this one for a little bit because it's got the list of all that I need to talk about. So it's task team 6, and it's the sugar-based value chain diversification strategy. And this is a team compiled of 15 industry stakeholders from government, sugar industry, labor, and academia. So we're trying to gather the brains around this whole thing and trying to solve these problems. The first one that we always look at is, and we always think about it because of Brazil and their wonderful ethanol production, bioethanol production, and their fuel use in their country is bioethanol for fuel blending. But as you can see there in the brackets, it's subject to the viable economic model. Just interesting, there's 1.4 trillion liters of ethanol fuel that is being made in the world today. And most of it is being blended at a rate of 10 to 11% in fuel and in countries like Brazil. And sugarcane makes up 59% of the global feedstock for this. But unfortunately in South Africa, with our fuel pricing system, we cannot produce it at the moment for the value of your basic fuel price. Remember, your basic fuel price is what your oil refiners bring in or refine fuel at. It's probably around 6-7 rand a litre. And then you add on all the taxes. Remember, half our fuel price is taxes and levies and all sorts of things to help the fiscus and the road accident fund, etc. So we actually cannot produce it at that basic fuel price, and we are uncompetitive at the moment. But when fuel or oil jumps to $100 or $120 a barrel, hey, then we might be in the game. The next one that I'd like to talk about is power cogeneration. Now, and that is the biomass cogenerated electricity. It's in the middle of the list there. That is, a sugar mill is actually quite a wonderful thing. You know, we get all our water that comes in from the cane stalks. 70% of a cane stalk is water, so our water is taken care of once the mill is started. And our electricity, because the mill is a hot, very hot heat-producing place, there's a lot of steam floating around, and that steam is then used once the mill is started at the startup, is then used to run the mill for the rest of the season, because it's a self-generating system. It's a self-contained system. So the idea was obviously to use whatever excess steam there was to run steam turbines to generate electricity. This has always been on top of the list, but unfortunately, due to the, and about 700 to 800 megawatts of power of electricity capacity has been estimated by the industry to be able to feed into the South African grid. That's a lot of electricity. But unfortunately, there are two major things that are in the way at the moment. It's the pricing mechanism for Eskom to take on that electricity into the grid, which doesn't make sense for the industry at the moment, and the capital injection that the mills would require. It's estimated at about 20 billion rand would be required to upgrade our mills and our boilers and turbines, to invest in these steam turbines, which are very, very expensive, to generate that type of electricity. And unfortunately, the tariff mechanism doesn't allow that for now. Unfortunately for the consumer with rising and farmers with rising price increases, maybe there might be an opportunity if electricity prices increase, and there might be an opportunity to look at this opportunity in terms of a renewable source of electricity rather than just a fossil fuel source. But unfortunately, that's kind of on the back burner, excuse the pun. But what we are quite excited about, and there's others along the list there, like biogas, which I'll get to in a minute, and then other products like portable industry, pharmaceutical grade bioethanol, that's already being produced in the country. There are opportunities to produce more, especially with all the need for sanitizers, etc., that are coming through now. But there's two opportunities that we're very excited about. And one is the second on the list there, the biojet fuel, and the other is the biogas. And this task team 6 is working very, very hard at the moment to get these researched and all the economic models in place to make the proposals to get these operational. And if you go to the next slide there, Denene. So what is biojet fuel, bioaviation fuel? There's and I'm going to throw another few words at you. Sustainable aviation fuels. They're basically low carbon alternatives. And what's happening in the world, because your northern hemisphere are under such pressure and we all are, as John said, to reduce our carbon footprints. One of the major ones that people can see definitely by airplanes flying in the sky is the fuel used in flying aircraft, and a lot of the northern hemisphere countries and countries like Australia and New Zealand are looking at blending their fuel, their aviation fuel, with biofuels, and mandatory blending of 50% by the EU has been mandated by 2030. So we're looking at being able to offer the aircraft that are refueling at OR Tambo or King Shark International or Cape Town International with biofuel that is 50% blended with fuel made from sugarcane by 2030. And this is definitely a significant opportunity for us because the demand will be there. It's not, and the price, because the demand is there, the price is also going to be in the right position. Those aircraft that land in these countries are mandated to refuel with that blended fuel, and so therefore the opportunity is there for industry like South Africa. And unfortunately, what is sad is that it's not our own policy that is driving this demand. It's unfortunately other countries' policy that are driving this demand, but it's something that we can work with and we can take opportunity. The next one there, Denene.
Richard, can I just ask you to wrap up because we are going to start running out of time.
Okay, I'll go quick. Okay, so yeah, that's basically just talking about the opportunity we have there. We could use 50% of our sugarcane to create this fuel for biojet fuel, and when we look at the bottom there, you can see 2.4 billion liters of ethanol can be created for the SA fuel sector. And a lot of that, 1.6 billion tons, a billion liters can be used at OR Tambo alone. So let's move on. And then the final opportunity, and Denene, this is my final slide before I end off, biogas. And biogas, not only for creation of sugar at the mill, creation of electricity at the mills, but also on farm. Let me just talk about energy, biogas at the mills. The mills can use a lot of the bagasse, which is the fiber left over from sugarcane production, in a thermochemical conversion into biogas. And by feeding it through gas turbines, which are actually cheaper and more efficient than your highly expensive specialized steam turbines, we can then generate electricity at the mill level. And that could then answer that question of that 700, 800 megawatts of electricity that can be created at mill level using biogas and gas turbines. And then on farm, the two pictures at the bottom are you can see there that biogas digester is on one of our farms in the North Coast. It's a proven concept. From tops and trash, which is the dry leaves and matter you can see left over after harvesting cane on the picture on the left there, are fed into the biodigester. and farmers can create their own electricity for their own farm use. And they can then feed into microgrids. You know, a lot of our farmers are in rural areas with communities all around them. And this is the other thing we often forget. We often forget that Eskom is this big behemoth. We actually need to start looking after our own communities and our own systems, and we could even look at creating microgrids using this renewable source of energy, biogas. So next one there, Denene. Yeah, those are the basically the conclusions. Sustainable aviation fuels is something we're really looking at now. Ethanol for fuels needs a subsidy to develop the industry, unfortunately for now. Cogen of electricity, the increased cap might be useful to the industry, but we're going to be working on that. But cash constraints still exist. If you look at our milling colleagues and the need to invest, there are some cash constraints there. And biogas, great value proposition for on-farm and at the mill level. Thank you, Denene. That's about it.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, we are running a bit short of time. We have to stop the meeting at 10:30. So I'm going to move straight on to Dr. Tokka to quickly talk about their experiences. If we have time, we will get back with a few questions for you, Richard. But yeah, we can move on. Dr. Tokka, if you can please switch on your microphone and video and join me.
Right. Denene, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm just going to get your presentation up. If I can please ask you to try and run through it as quickly as possible so that we can try to get to a couple of questions. And there you go.
Good day, everyone. I'm Tokka van Heever from the Kakamas area. English is not our first language, so please bear with me. I haven't been using it a lot lately. We're one of the first farms in this area that started solar energy, and we were some of the unfortunate guys that first built the system and then had to wait up to 18 months to get connected to the grid. So I think what is the main thing you have to know, or from our experience, is there's a few things you have to know. You have to know exactly the pricing of your system that you want to install on your property. And for that, you need somebody that understands the pricing and work through your previous Eskom accounts, and then you'll be able to decide what the size of the plant is. But before starting to build, and Chris has gone through all of that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, get all your paperwork in place. We are in the process of building a third plant now at the moment, and we're doing it the right way around. We're waiting for every certificate that we need, that we can put up the plant, and we're going to take it from there. I think the rest of this slide has been handled by Chris. The different sort of licenses that you have to get, and we can just go on to the next slide, Denene. The second thing that you have to understand is on the Rotoflex system, what Chris talked of, there are two seasons. There's a high demand and a low demand season, and they differ. They don't look exactly the same. And the way this system works is if you bank in the green town, you will only be used that credits in the green town, or in the yellow town, or in the red town. So you can't switch credits from one period to the next. And seeing that the middle of the day is usually standard time, well, what we ended up with was left with credits, because year end for Eskom is end of March. And if you haven't used all your credits by that time, you will lose it. and you will start banking for the next year from the 1st of April again. Okay, we can go to the next one, Denene. Yeah, this is just explaining what I've just said there. Once we've gone through the period, we saw exactly what I've just said to you now, is that we didn't use it in the right way. And we ended up with standard time credits, which we couldn't use in the end in the last 2 months. So you have to plan right through the year, and you need someone to explain that to you and to work with you through that, because we as farmers don't really understand how that banking system works. And you might think it can't be that difficult, but you need someone, and also for your Eskom accounts, because changing over from a normal system to a banking system is sometimes a lot of difficulty arises from Eskom side to get your accounts, what is the word I'm looking for now? But to get accounts sorted that I'm not getting enough credits or too little credits, and by yourself you won't manage that. So all I want to say is use someone that's got experience in doing what they're doing. Okay, we can go to the next one. Some of the misconceptions of the farmers, there are two costs. One is a fixed cost and one is the energy cost. And the only area where you will save is on your energy side. So your fixed cost will still sit there, except you build a self-distribution system on your farm, and you will have one point and then supply yourself from that point. And then when there's load shedding with grid ties, there's no power. Okay, and the last one. So getting to a conclusion, building the system is easy. First, get your paperwork done and make exactly sure that you understand how the banking and financials of the systems work. Thank you. Was that short enough?
Thank you, Dr. Tokka. That was definitely very short and sweet with some very valuable advice there for farmers. So if I could just ask all the presenters to just switch your videos and mics back on. So I think we've got time maybe just for a quick 1 or 2 questions. And I'm going to start with something that Dr. Tokka has now mentioned. I'm going back to you, John, and maybe also for you, Chris, is this issue of the misconceptions that farmers have about what is going to change once they start making use of renewables. What do you find are often farmers don't understand or they expect will happen, but then the reality is quite different?
John, if I quickly can jump in there. You need to make sure that after you've done your installation of your solar farm, that the company that have done your installation is working with you afterwards. Because now the system is built, the system is running, it's exporting, it's going on. But now the paperwork is happening. Now you're receiving your account from Eskom. Now you receive an account, like Tokka said. Now you see that, okay, but I've banked energy on red time, I've banked energy on green time, I've banked energy on yellow time. But now you need to use that energy during your 12-month period. If you're not using that period, that's what happened with Tokka, is that you're going to lose it. So for instance, if you look at red time, say you bank 1,000 kilowatt hour in red time in high season, that's 4 Rand, I think, I can't remember, but that's 4 Rand roughly. So 1,000 times 4 Rand, that's what you're losing. So now your capital investment is not making sense. And John said that you are looking at 3 years and 4 years payback period. Now you're not going to look at 3 and 4 years payback period. You're looking at 6, 7 year payback period, because your planning of your system afterwards is not being done like your farm is being run.
And maybe just to just to add to that, Denene, I think, I mean, what has come through quite clearly here is the planning. So do your homework, do your planning, get the right installer, get the right advice, because it's a lot more complicated than what meets the eye, especially when you're trying to then take all that and put it into financial terms. And you're trying to look at repayment ability, payback periods. You're actually trying to reduce the risk, that your business faces. And if you don't actually do it correctly, it could come back to bite you. And that's what worries me. I mean, I think the point of doing this, yes, there's the personal viewpoint. We want to do good. We want to have cleaner energy, etc. And then there's the business sustainability and the risk approach. So if you're planning, like any other planning, if you're going into investment or planting new citrus, etc., if your planning's not done correctly and it doesn't deliver what you expect, it's going to have a financial impact. And you don't want that to sink your business. It was the very reason that you might have gone into it was to mitigate the risk. So you don't want that to be your downfall. So, I think his points are valid.
Thanks for that. And Richard, to get back to your presentation, I just wanted to ask if is there any idea in terms of timelines for some of these projects that you mentioned, and when, according to the master plan, when there's going to start to be some implementation of some of these plans?
There we go. Thank you. You need to unmute me. Sure. Yeah. Timelines. Yeah, that's the hardest question. How long is a piece of string? Yeah. Look, I think where the opportunities are, the master plan is definitely looking to that 2030 sort of timeline. But I think in the next 5 years, we need to have something up and running. And I think the biojet fuel is definitely an opportunity that is knocking on our door, basically. And so that's something we're pushing really hard from the industry point of view. So if we could have one or two of these things that I was talking about, like biogas and the jet fuel operating by 2030, we would have won a massive battle in solving our production, our excess production conundrum. And then obviously that would stabilize the industry, right? So at the moment, we are an industry in decline. We have had mills, one mill closed down on the south coast, Umzunkulu, and so we need to arrest that, and that's what the master plan is doing. So yeah, 2030 is that key date, and we're really working hard to achieve it. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. And then just the last question. I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Tokka. So, I mean, you did point out some of the misconceptions and then this administrative and red tape challenges that you face, but you said you are busy with your third installation now. So I gather from that even though it is quite sometimes quite difficult to get started and to get your system online, that it has definitely been worth your while.
Yeah, even though we didn't get the whole system or the credits 100% right in year one, we still made, or the system actually produced 10% more than what our projection was. So on the energy side, we're doing better. I'm in the best place in the world because we never get clouds in this part of the world. But yeah, it's a very good system. And after, whether it's now the 4 years John has been talking of, or the 8 years or 6 years, we made our budget on right in the beginning, and that doesn't really matter. Once you pass that point, your energy is for free. So it will make a huge difference.
Okay. Thanks for that. Richard, we've just got one question from one of the audience members, Annie, who asks if you've got any indication from the aviation sector on prices for SAF. I'm not sure if Richard.
Hello, there we go.
Hi.
I'm here. We're a bit
Yes.
slow. We're a bit slow here in KwaZulu-Natal.
No, I'm from KwaZulu-Natal. That's not true.
No, pricing. So yeah, we no, from my knowledge at the moment, as I sit here, no, I don't have the pricing for that now, but we are in continuous discussions. We actually have got another meeting with them next week. So as this opportunity unfolds, so we'll get more information. But just looking at the quantum required by the aviation fuel guys, it makes sense, you know. And when we look at what the current pricing scenarios are for your fossil fuel environment, it will make sense. So yeah, it's great that we can benefit from policies elsewhere in the world. Yeah.
Thanks for that. So we are pretty much out of time now, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you again, Chris, John, Tokka, and Richard for very informative presentations. To all of the audience members, we will share the presentations as well as a link to the recording of the session with you. And then just thank you again from my side to AgriSA, to Kulani, for approaching Farmers Weekly to partner with you on this. I've learned a lot. It's been really interesting. So thank you, Kulani, and thank you to Sandira Chetty. She's our digital editor at Farmers Weekly, who's been running all the admin on the site for the meeting. So thank you, Sandira, for keeping us online and active. I'm going to hand back to you, Kulani, and I think you said Chris to van der Rede, CEO of AgriSA, was just going to do a short closure.
That is correct, Denene. I'll leave it to Chris to do the closing. Thank you. Okay, I see Chris is not online. Let me try maybe wrapping up quickly from my side. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Denene, for agreeing to partner with us for this webinar. As you rightfully pointed out, it was really an insightful one. I also learned a whole lot of things that I didn't know that I thought I knew about the whole green energy space. And to all our speakers as well, thank you very much for your time and agreeing to be part of this webinar. And we'd also like to thank the team at AgriSA that has also helped to put this together, Tia, and the marketing team as well. Media and marketing team, thank you very much. And to the audience as well, thank you for joining us. We hope that this was as insightful and as exciting for you as it was for us. And yeah, let's just hope we'll see a bit of traction with the green energy conversation and seeing how it will be a game changer for the sector. Thank you very much. Have yourself a great day further.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.